Hey everybody, it's Phil. Today I've been asked to explain game theory optimal poker in 5 levels of increasing complexity, starting with my 6-year-old son all the way up to a poker expert. Game theory optimal play in any game is a balanced strategy that can't be exploited. In poker, we use GTO solvers to enhance our understanding of how the game works, even though the strategies are too complex to memorize. All right, level 1, my 6-year-old son. Imagine we're playing a game where I put a piece of candy in one of my hands, and then I held the other one up like this, and you had to guess which one had the candy. If you got it right, you'd get the candy. Otherwise, you wouldn't. And let's say we played it again and again and again. And let's say I told you exactly what my strategy was going to be. So if my strategy was, I'm going to keep it in my right hand every time, what would you guess on the first try? Yeah, you'd guess my right hand. And what would you guess on the second try? You'd guess my right hand. Okay, so that strategy for me would not be a very good strategy if I want to keep my candy. Now, let's say instead, to be tricky, I said, okay, I'm not going to tell you where it starts, but I'm going to switch it from one to the other every time. So I'll secretly pick one and it's in my left. Let's say you guess my right. I'd say, oh, nope, it was in my left. But now you know that I'm going to switch it every time. So which would you guess next? Yeah, you guessed my right. Okay, let's play again. Which would you guess? My left. All right, I'm losing all my candy again. So how am I going to come up with a strategy that I tell you that you can't figure out? Do you have any guesses? Let's say that between each turn, I went over into the bathroom and I tossed a coin. And if it landed on heads, I would put it in my right hand. And if it landed on tails, I'd put it in my left hand. Now let's say the first time I go away, I toss a coin, you don't know which side it lands on, and I come out and I say this. Which one would you guess? And would you know that it was in there? No, you wouldn't. And on the second time, which would you guess? And would you know? No, you would never know because I was doing something called randomizing. I was flipping the coin and you don't know what side it's going to land on, and that's how I picked which hand to put it in. So I told you my strategy and you still couldn't figure it out. That is game theory optimal play. All right, level 2, teen. What's up? So let's say we were playing rock, paper, scissors, and I wanted to come up with a strategy that could not be beaten. What do you think that might be? So let's say I switched between paper and rock and occasionally threw scissors, but mostly paper, rock, a little bit of scissors. Could I be beat? The thing is I could, because somebody could play against me and notice a pattern. And in actuality, the only non-pattern would be randomizing between rock, paper, and scissors. The way I would do this is, let's say I have a random number generator app on my phone, which you probably do. I would put 3 numbers in there, I'd go away, I'd press it, I'd look at number 2, which is scissors for me, and then I would throw scissors. And that way you would never know what I was going to do next. And while my strategy is not going to beat your strategy, because I'm not even guessing, it's just random, you're not going to be able to come up with a strategy that beats mine. Now, we apply that to poker, but in a much bigger way. College student, amateur poker player. Today I'm going to teach you about the Ace, King, Queen game. This is a toy game, which just means a simplified version of poker. Obviously, you can have toy games in other games, but a simplified version of the game that we can actually solve and come up with a GTO solution. So the way it works is there's $100 in the pot, and we each have $100 in our stack. You are going to get dealt a king, and I'm going to get dealt an ace or a queen, and it's your turn to act first. So let's figure out the perfect way to play. Starting with you have a king. Half the time I have an ace, half the time I have a queen. Are you going to bet or check? And to make things simple, I just want you to know that the best bet size, if either of us bet, is all in. So that's the only bet size we'll use. Check. So why did you check? Yeah. So there's no reason for a king to bet, because if you go all in, then I'm going to call you when I have an ace and win. I'm going to fold when I have a queen, and you're not going to get any more money. So your play is to check. We actually just solved for one player. Now, what's my strategy going to be? So when I have an ace, what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to go all in because there's no reason not to go all in. So when I have an ace, I'm going to go all in. And when I have a queen, what am I going to do? No, so I'm not always going to go all in, because if I go all in with an ace every time and I go all in with a queen every time, then you have to call $100 to win $200, and I'm going to be bluffing half the time. So you're going to win $200 half the time and lose $100 half the time, which makes it an easy call. So I actually have to balance how often I bluff with my queen. Since you're getting those 2-to-1 odds, we call it, I need to have an ace twice as often as I have a queen. So I'm going to go all in with all of my aces and half of my queens. And that way you can't exploit my strategy. So we've solved the first bet for you, and we've solved the first one for me. And now we need to get back to you for one final decision. You're facing an all-in bet. What do you do? Well, it doesn't actually matter because I balanced my value bets and bluffs perfectly, right? But you actually have to balance your calls, because if you don't balance your calls perfectly, I can exploit you either by never bluffing with my queens or always bluffing with my queens. So you have to get your ratio of folds correct. So let's look at what I am risking with my bluffs and what I am getting. I'm risking $100 with my bluffs to win $100 in the pot. We call that 1-to-1 odds. So when I have 1-to-1 odds, that means that when I win, I'm going to win $100. When I lose, I'm going to lose $100. So how often do I need to win or lose to break even? Yeah, half the time. So much like I'm bluffing with my queen half the time, you have to call with your king half the time. And now we've solved the entire game. The ace-king-queen game is very similar to river play in poker. So we use these concepts to get a rough idea of how we play on the river, but it is a lot more complicated in practice. By the way, I hope you're having fun with this. I am having fun with it. I'm glad my team thought of it. The reason they thought of it is because I just released a course on simplifying solvers, which is how I approach solver study in a way that I believe is a lot easier and faster and better than the way many of my peers do. If you're interested in learning more about it, head to runitonce.com. Let's get into the next one. Grad student, regular poker player. You understand the ace-king-queen game. You understand on the river that we have to balance our value hands and our bluffs, but we also have to do that on the flop and on the turn. This is called range construction. We have to think about our betting range on the flop, our betting range on the turn, and our betting range on the river, as well as pre-flop, of course, so that we can't get exploited throughout the hand. And it gets more complicated as we go because there are so many flops and so many different turns for so many different flops and so many different rivers for different turns for different flops. It's really complex. What a lot of people can get wrong is they play the flop in a vacuum, or they play the turn in a vacuum, or they play the river in a vacuum. And if you play the river in a vacuum, but your flop and turn ranges are out of whack, your river ranges are going to be out of whack as well. So one of the things we really have to consider on the flop is board coverage. When you're making a river bet, there are no more cards to come, so you don't have to think about board coverage. But on the flop, we have a turn to come and a river to come. And so if we kind of construct our strategy in such a way that with our bets, we never connect with straight completing turns or flush completing turns, or we never connect with the middle card pairing because we don't bet middle pair, that's a problem, because on those boards, our range is not going to be well supported, and we're not going to be able to take aggressive action, take control of the hand, and take pots down even with our bluffs. So oftentimes on the flop, we do a lot of small betting, whereas on the turn and river, we incorporate some larger bets in addition to small bets. Sometimes on the flop, small bet will be my only sizing. And the reason for that is if you bet big, there are some hands that you really don't want to include, like that middle pair or bottom pair, in a big bet range. And so you're forced to either include it, which is kind of bad for you, or not include it, which is also kind of bad for you because you don't have board coverage. And so usually what happens on the flop is the player with the range advantage does a lot of small betting to kind of nudge that range advantage a little bit. And then on the turn and river, we start opening things up. On the river, there are no more cards to come. On the turn, there's just one more card to come. Just like on the river, we have to think about minimum defense frequency. So when you're calling somebody's bet, you have to defend enough that their bluffs are indifferent. That is also true on the flop and turn. But much like the exceptions that I talked about earlier to range construction, there are some flops and some turns and some rivers on which you actually should fold a lot more or call a lot more than minimum defense frequency would indicate if you're just looking at the pot size and the bet size. And that's either because of a range advantage. If your opponent has a range advantage, you can actually overfold. And if the board is particularly draw heavy, you want to overcall often because you have more hands with equity and they have more equity when you call. I know it sounds like a lot to think about, and it is, but if you just ask yourself, what does my range look like here? Does my range like this card? Does my range like this board? Am I going to be able to hit this kind of river card and this kind of river card? Am I going to be able to have good hands on all of the runouts? Am I going to be able to have bluffs on all of the runouts? That'll help you construct your range on earlier streets. Level 5, Expert, Pro. You already understand how GTO works. You've studied solvers. You have memorized some strategies. You've implemented some strategies decently well. The main thing I want to talk to you about today is shifting your mindset about studying with solvers. When you're going in there trying to memorize all of these outputs and these strategies, what you're doing is trying to emulate a theoretically break-even strategy, so to speak, and you're not going to nail it. When you go out there and you try to play perfect solver poker, you fail to do so because it's impossible, and you leave yourself exploitable in doing so because you're not trying to counter other players' adjustments. If, for example, you don't realize that you're probing too many value hands on the turn and you're not probing enough with bluffs, your opponent is going to take advantage of you if they're astute by overfolding to your turn probe and by bluffing a lot against your check. And if you're not seeing what they're doing and trying to counter it, what's going to happen is they're just going to get away with that again and again and again because your range construction is off. You've tried to emulate the solver strategy and you haven't done it successfully because it's impossible. This is why I always advocate for not trying to play like a solver, but learning to think like a solver. So when I study with solvers, I'm not trying to memorize a strategy. I'm basically never trying to memorize a strategy, with some exceptions for pre-flop play. What I'm trying to do is understand exactly why the solver is doing what it's doing. And even though a solver uses brute force calculations to come to its conclusions, the solver doesn't know why it's doing what it's doing. It ends up playing a perfect strategy, which there is going to be logic to. There's going to be logic that we understand as humans. What I'm doing when I'm studying is, other than coming up with some kind of general heuristics for like, okay, these are the boards I want to bet small on, these are the boards I want to bet big on, and kind of bucketing those together. Other than that, I'm just trying to pull concepts and understand the whys behind all of this perfect game theory optimal play. Then when I get to the table, I am not trying to recall different outputs of sims and copy them. What I'm trying to do is think, okay, I kind of understand conceptually how this spot plays. You have a range advantage, and I should be defending with these kind of hands and making sure to bluff with roughly these kind of hands. Then I execute that. Plus, I have so much mental bandwidth available to take advantage of what you are doing. So one of the biggest kind of hidden value things within solver study is when you make it easy on yourself, when you create a simplified strategy, when you just understand concepts and you're not trying to dig deep into your memory, using all that mental bandwidth, you free up so much room for great exploitative play. And exploitative play is where all of the money is made. I have been in so many situations, even against great players, where they're betting the river and I think they're bluffing like 60% of the time when they're supposed to be bluffing 30, or they're bluffing 5% of the time when they're supposed to be bluffing 30, just because of what I know about them, the bet sizes they use throughout the hand, the way that the board is run out, and given how I know how they structure their range and how difficult it is to have enough bluffs on a certain texture, what it would take to bluff enough on that texture, and so on and so forth. And if you're just sitting there trying to regurgitate your memorized strategy, you have no room to make those plays that are worth tons and tons of big blinds. All right, I hope you enjoyed that half as much as I did. That was really fun. If you have any other ideas for videos like this, leave them in the comments and I will check those out because I'd like to do this again. Also, my course, Simplifying Solvers, is out on runitoonce.com now. Check that out and I will see you in the next video. Till then, take care and good luck.